Hi everybody, Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. Today I've got Dan with me today and we're going to be talking about leadership marketing. What is leadership marketing? Why you need leadership marketing? And Dan's going to explain it all. Dan, where can people find you and what are your where can people find you?
You can find me on LinkedIn. That's the best place. That's where most of our content and our activity is. You can also find us at Trends.ceo, which is the URL of the company.
Excellent. So let's dive straight in with a definition. What is leadership marketing? Because I've seen lots of things with marketing, and what's the difference with leadership marketing?
Yeah, we try and describe it as it's an organized way to get an enterprise's executives integrated into the corporate go-to-market strategy. And so we tried to coin this phrase as being different than, say, personal branding. That might be the closest thing that you've heard to it, but leadership marketing is much different. I don't know about you, when I hear personal branding, it sounds a bit self-serving, and it also sounds like a one-off. An executive does personal branding over here in the corner, and leadership marketing is, being aware of a trend that all of the customer channels, all the key B2B customer channels now involve an individual. So if you look at social and video and podcasts, people want to hear from the company's leaders. And rather than doing that historically, what we think in a pocket over here and a bit of personal branding over there, it's saying, how can we get all of our leaders organized? Whether that's their narrative and what they're going to talk about, their channels, their branding. How do we do this in an organized way so that the executives are now integrated into the corporate go-to-market or communication strategy?
I think that the way that things have changed, hasn't it? That brand is important, but because we're going online now, we're actually checking people out. We're checking the leaders out. So if we want to work at an organization, we check the leaders to see if they're online. Are they? Is this an organization I want to work for? Is that what you're seeing?
Oh, 100%. All the stats showing that. I think we've known that for some time, and that stat is just increasing. You can look at, I think, Edelman and all of the big companies that study this have all the stats on looking at a leader's LinkedIn profile, for example. It's a no-brainer, and I think that's table stakes now, is to just have a presence. But it's now about taking it the next step. It's actually putting your thoughts out there. It's not creating content just for the sake of it. You're talking about the vision and the mission that your company is on and the things that you believe in. That pulls in talent. And that's what I would say is one of the big change. If you want to talk about the talent piece, there's offensive and defensive. So, a few years ago, it was fine to just have content up there. So if someone came to look for you, you have a presence. If they search for you or your company, you have content there. But now I think it's important to go on the defense. When you put content out there and you put your views out there, you're pulling in, you're being discovered, right? On these channels where people are scrolling their feeds, they see your leaders, they see yourself. And so it's a discoverability thing. And then you're pulling in talent with your messages and with your vision.
Because what you want are people that are on social media to go, that looks really interesting. Can I come and work for you?
Absolutely.
So, what are we seeing? You say there's a difference between personal brand and leadership marketing. What would you say was the difference?
Twofold. Personal branding, I don't think it's, at least in my experience, it's not done at the company go-to-market strategy level. It's, hey, we have a great leader over here. They have they want to be a spokesperson. Maybe they're really good on camera, or let's get them some publicity, but it's in pockets. And so the big change, I would say, and I don't know if a lot of companies are really doing this well, but you see them headed in that direction, which is to say, we have key executives. Some of them are spokespeople, they're key opinion leaders. You've got, the CEO who needs to talk about a number of different things, whether it be employer branding, customers, the community. So he or she is up there, but then you have your other leaders that are in charge of a market or a discipline, and they all have their own path and their own kind of niche that they need to be experts on. So it's bringing them all together and then saying, well, how do we now execute on them, seeing them as you're looking at them as a content production channel. So they have views. How do we take those views and those thoughts and turn that into content? And then also, how do we do it in an orchestrated way so that when we have campaigns, when we have key messages and strategy, that we have all of the leaders not speaking the same language, but doing it in an organized way where they're similarly branded, and they're being consistent. And so that, the organization of it is the biggest change, but also I think about what they're talking about. And I call it specifically leadership marketing, because leadership communications, that has been a term for a while, and a discipline in a while. And I'm not creating it just for the sake of creating a category, but I really do think it's differently. What I see historically is that when it's been driven by a communications messaging. So if you see a leader out there, it's usually about, if you look at LinkedIn, it's maybe the awards that they've won, press release type messages, like very high level messaging. And that aligns, I think, with communications a lot, at least in my experience in a big enterprise. A lot of their messaging and the content they're creating aligns more with communications. And I think the big opportunity is to align more with going to market in terms of, customer insights, industry, campaigns, thought leadership. How do you bring your leaders into that, where every day they're seen as this visionary leader with incredible acumen and incredible insights on the customer. So they're giving customer value. It's not so much about talking about the company, but it's about how I can help my customer every day. I know they're on LinkedIn. I know they're on YouTube or these other channels. How can I show up every day and consistently help them solve their problems and, show them what I believe in?
Yeah, I think there's, if you look at the people that are looking for jobs nowadays, they're looking for, what's the diversity and inclusion policy of the company? What's the what's the purpose? What's the ESG? And I think that what we're looking for is the leadership to be talking about that, isn't it?
Absolutely. I think talking about it and then also showing it in practice as well, I think.
Yep.
Because I think, again, there's the messaging, there's the values that your company believes in, and you should be communicating those, and you should be talking about this and how you're making progress. And then on the other side, it's also about just showing it through your actions. And so highlighting your leadership team. If you're really diverse, you don't need to talk about it every day. You can show it in the fact that you've got other leaders that you're promoting their content, or they're on camera with you. And again, you don't have to talk about that subject matter specifically. You could be talking about the industry or customers, but you can be showing it through your actions and through the content that you're creating.
So who's doing this well at the moment, in terms of who's doing leadership marketing well?
Yeah, great question. So our customers are mainly large, global professional services. We do a lot with accounting, big consultancy companies. And just like many, many things, it's actually, the startups in the mid-market that do a great job. And so what I try and do is we study a lot of these startups, and we look at what are they doing well? What kind of content are they creating? How is it just the CEO, or is it the whole leadership team that's doing that? And because we've got lots of examples, if we want to talk about in the startup and the mid-market space, you've got Chris Walker, who in my world, everybody looks to as one of the best. And he's attributed, and every day he'll go on LinkedIn and say this, that 50% of their revenue, which is tens of millions, is coming from his personal LinkedIn. And they have a whole new methodology on how to measure it that, historically we haven't looked at that. And so he's one of them. Sam Jacobs is another. He's the founder of Pavilion, which is a community around sales leaders, and he shows up every day. If you look at his content, and he's just both these guys are just giving tremendous value. It's like every day they're answering the pain points that you have. For me, and being a smaller business owner,
Yep.
They're targeting me and the value. It's like as soon as I get to that point where I need either a marketing go-to-market consultant like Chris Walker or a community, I'm going to them because
they're always front of mind, aren't they?
They're front of mind, and the value is there, and I know that they are the best at what they do because they give me value every day. So this is how it will change search and the other channels, is that it's all about discovery now. So I've discovered them. I didn't know I had these problems, but they came in my feed every day and they're giving me value. And then when it comes time to have to buy from a vendor, I'm not going to Google. I'm not doing RFP. I know exactly who I want to work with. And I think that's B2B marketing in its most simple form. I think we tend to overcomplicate it in some ways, but that's really it at the end of the day. And so I think a lot of these big organizations can look to how these younger, faster growing CEOs are approaching this, who do digital and who do marketing by second nature. And not to go off track here, but we've actually studied this. We've got some data to back it up, where we've looked at, just as an example, I'm based here in Canada, and we looked at the big 5 banks. Yep. So the giants that have been in place for years. And then we looked at the 5 fast growing digital banks, the neo banks. And we studied like, what's the difference? And a lot of these insights might make sense. You might look at them and say, yeah, okay, big bank CEOs should be talking about this. But just as an example, we break their content categories into 4 categories. Are they talking about their own company? Are they talking about employer branding? Are they talking about leadership, so like coaching? Or the last one, what we think is the most important, is about the customer value, like industry insights and customer value. And the big difference was that when we looked at the big 5 banks, 8% of their content was actually talking about the customers and the market and giving value. I think that's small. It might make sense to others. They might say, yeah, they're such a big CEO, like they should be talking more about the people and the employer branding. So maybe that's fine. But if you looked at the fast growing ones, those CEOs are doing 30% of their content is about helping their customers and talking about the market. So it's quite a big difference. They really want to be a thought leader in that industry, and the others are, talking about different things. So it's there's no right or wrong. It should align with what your goals are. But if you look across the board, the large companies are doing it more like the big banks, and the fast growing ones, the ones that are getting followers and creating tons of value, they're laser focused on the customer. And if you just looked at the Sam Jacobs, the Chris Walker, and some of these other guys, it's 100% focused on the customer, their content.
Well, if you take Chris Walker, for example, I don't know what company he works for, what the name of the company he works for, but I don't need to, because I can go and look it up.
Yeah.
And this is the switch that's taken place. And I think that what you're probably seeing with those top banks is that they still think it's all about standing on top of the building with a megaphone saying our bank is great, our bank is great, where that isn't the way that's not the way that people buy anymore.
It's changing very fast. And it's in my experience too, sometimes the leaders just haven't thought about it this way. Because I think the biggest risk is that they're not very active on these channels. And so if you're not listening to podcasts, and if you're not on LinkedIn all the time, you don't even know that this world exists of giving value and insights and how this whole machine works. And so in my experience, that's the biggest gap, is that they're not using the channels, so they don't see it. And when you explain to them that this is the shift, and let me show you some examples of competitors or peers, they tend to get it right away, because they're all about their customers, right? So they're just not really thinking about these channels in that way. And I think it's also it's changing quickly. So a lot of the comms and marketing people, this is just a shift that's taking place in the last few years. So I think as soon as you show them, hey, this is where it's headed, I think they can quickly understand it and then make a pivot.
So what if I'm a marketer? and I believe that I need to get my CEO or the C-suite online. What do I need to do?
Step one, I talk about this a lot, is when you have a pitch, obviously it starts with you're going to pitch them in some way on the opportunity.
Yeah.
And early in my career, I learned that the stats don't work that well.
Mm.
I think, when I was first in social, I would use the engagement and those metrics, and they may or may not land. I like to show real stories. So people that they look up to, it could be a thought leader in their industry or maybe a competitor or a peer. You're going to show them the real life examples of like, hey, this is the type of content that they're creating at high volumes. And then show them real engagements. Like look at the senior people that are engaging back, right? You got to show them real faces. We actually have what we call a trust score. We create
Right.
up our own methodology on how to measure a leader's presence, mainly on LinkedIn, their content quality, a few different numbers. And then we just line them up against competitors and we say, hey, you're in number 5 right now of 5. Let's get you to number 2. So showing them actually how that looks on paper. And then the second one I always say is, you speak their language. I think a lot of these channels, LinkedIn, creating content, all it is adding more scale and visibility to a lot of the things that they're already doing. So you can go ahead and give that, that customer call. If you do it on Zoom, maybe there's 10, 20, 50 people. Do it on LinkedIn Live like you do, Tim, and extend that reach to 10,000. Right? It's not really changing a lot of things. Just talk their language. It's about visibility. It's about scale. It's about all of those metrics that are important. Just show them how this can amplify that in a way that hasn't been able to. It wasn't possible in the past.
Just before we went live, you talked about speed of execution. Give us talk to us about that again.
Yeah, I've tried to. I try to do my best to portray how I see it. But I've been in marketing for large enterprises for a long time, and it's a big engine. It can often be a slow engine, and here's where I see how things are changing, or how leadership marketing brings speed to go to market. Is that you have these large organizations, large marketing departments, and of copywriters and creatives, and video and strategists, and they are absolutely brilliant in their function. But a lot of the times they're not business experts. I've worked in companies for years that I was still, after years, being unclear on what do we, in the complex companies, what do we do with customers, right? Because you're distant from the customer. You're a function and you're not interacting with customers a lot. And so the way I see it in consulting companies is that the leader up here has a vision. They know what the customer pain points are. They know what the customers are looking for. But when that message comes down to the marketing department, it can get diluted. It's almost like a broken telephone in a way. And so you're trying to ghostwrite for them in a report, and you're trying to find the perfect wording and the perfect stock image to try and get this message that's up here in the organization into something that's creative. And it takes a long time, and it can be diluted. Whereas today, customers want to see the leaders, and the social channels want to put people in front. So instead of those weeks and months of trying to create this ghost written report,
Perfect article. Yeah.
Put the leaders in front of the camera, get them to start talking in a couple hours. You've got great content that actually customers really find valuable and transparent. They know who's running the business. They know all these great things. So the speed at which you can get great content out is just shrinking. It's changing the game. I think video content from leaders.
Yeah, I told you the story about Julie Sweet, who's the chief executive at Accenture.
That's right.
During COVID, they've got 250,000 people in India, and people may remember that when COVID hit, that there wasn't enough oxygen, and she said, well, we're going to raise some money, and with immediately she'd got a following on LinkedIn, and immediately they were able to put something, and it was go. There wasn't lots of weeks of sending out press releases and helping something was going to happen. It went, and the employees picked it up, and they were able to raise money, and they were able to show quickly that they were able to give back. That's a fantastic message to put out onto to your customers and your investors and your employees and your future employees.
Great example. And again, the speed at which you can bring a message to market.
Speed of it is fantastic. Dan, thank you so much for coming on to today and talking to us about leadership marketing. Remind people where they can find you.
You find me on LinkedIn, Daniel Di Federico, and find us at Trends.ceo is the URL.
Excellent. Thank you so much for today, Dan, and really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank